Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Ajayi Pickering Haynes, who is a keynote speaker and health equity strategist. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. I love the work that you all are doing. So I'm excited to talk today and share more about my journey with you.
Pleasure to have you on the show, Ajayi. Like, honestly, hearing from you, obviously, keynote speaker and the work that you do in this community. So, looking forward to diving in and getting to know you a lot more in this. So, before we kind of like touch base on where you are currently, we want to kind of backtrack a little bit. We want to give the listeners a little bit of, context to like where you're from, your cultural background, and then we're continuing on from there. So, just talk a little bit more about your cultural background and where you grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands.
Mm, big up.
Small 32. Yes, got to. Small 32 square mile island, near Puerto Rico. And I think as I think about my childhood, there's so many things that kind of come to mind with coming from a cultural background. I think one of them is just this idea of coming from a small place with a whole lot of pride. I'm sure a lot of folks who are immigrants or from places outside of the U.S. are used to coming from environments where the place might be small, but the people have so much pride and so much love for where we come from.
True
And so
that.
I grew up around a lot of that, a very community-oriented, community-centric environment where your neighbors were like family, like it
Mm,
really kind of had that sort of feel to growing up on an island. And I spent a lot of time on the beach. I live really close to the beach. I love water. And as a child, my mom was an educator, so she was been an educator for over 30 years. And I like to say that, she would bring home strays with her. So she would bring home students with her. As a child, it was really annoying, but reflecting back on that time, it really started teaching me about some of the core values I have right now, which are like service and giving back and
yep, yep.
coaching and personal growth. So yeah, those are a couple of things I would mention that have kind of like summed up. There's so much more I could say, but I'm sure we'll get into it as we talk some
Mhm.
more.
And I think I'm, if I'm correct, I think you're the first individual from St. Thomas on the show.
Yes,
Now,
they did say that. So
you know what I'm
big up,
saying?
definitely
So
happy to
big up
represent.
yourself, right? Represent for St. Thomas because it's beautiful because I'm also Korean background as well too. Mother's from Jamaica, father's from St. Lucia, right? So hearing when I get to interview my individuals from the islands, I'm like, okay, let's go, let's dive in, right? And it's so beautiful to hear the stuff that you say about St. Thomas because the beautiful thing about our islands is they're so similar but so unique in so many ways, right? And I'm glad that you're on the show, represent for St. Thomas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
now, talk to us a little bit more about that St. Thomas culture. You dived a little bit into it, but I want to know a little bit more about that St. Thomas culture and like what was like one of the proudest moments you had as like a child growing up with
Yeah,
that.
I definitely can. I think for me, so my family, the Pickerings, I come from a long history of musicians in my family. My uncle, he was a panist, so he played the steel pan growing up. And then
Let's get it. Come
my
on.
yeah, and my grandfather's brother, my great uncle, he was a famous drummer back at home in the Virgin Islands. So I was part of this really important orchestra back at home called the Rising Stars Youth Steel Orchestra. It's an orchestra made up of students that play different pan instruments. And so yeah, that was a huge part of my childhood experience. It's a huge part of St. Thomas culture, just like other islands like Trinidad and other places. And being playing the pan growing up really had started to teach me not only about like leadership and discipline and commitment, but also exposed me to different genres of music. So not only did we play like calypso and soca and local genres, but we also played music that could be found all over throughout the world.
Mhm.
And so one of the moments that is one of my proudest childhood moments is when I competed in a local steel pan competition that we have at home. So we used to have this competition, this classical solo steel pan competition where panists would play classical pieces on their
Oh,
instruments. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and so it really taught me a life lesson because the first year I competed, I got second place in the competition. And the second year I competed, I wanted to win. And so I was like, okay, well, what do I need to do to win? And so I had actually worked with a mentor, a professor at the local university who helped coach me and train me as part of that experience. And the second year I was successful and I won the competition. But aside from it, being
Okay.
great that
Congratulations.
yeah, aside from it being great that I won, it really just taught me about the value of mentorship really early on, which is
Good. Good.
something that like I, hold dear to me in my career. I think, for us who come from backgrounds, immigrant backgrounds, foreign backgrounds, Caribbean islands, mentorship is even more important for us in these spaces that we occupy. And so, yeah, it was a great experience, but I
Mm,
think me just being willing to ask for help and me seeking out mentorship was a really valuable lesson as part of that experience.
mm. I'm glad you're mentioning that key word right there. A lot of the guests that have been on the show, that is a very, very common, excuse me, that's a very common word that is talked about. And a lot of them mention exactly what you said. Like, there's obviously mentors, but knowing the value of a mentor makes a big difference. Because anybody can be like, I got a mentor, I got somebody who gives me some good advice, but knowing the value of what this person could provide, knowing how to find one, knowing who's the, because there's so many individuals out there, right, that might have a little bit more knowledge and information above you, doesn't mean that they could be a good mentor. So the first
Absolutely.
person that you're looking at, like, and you went to someone at the university, you took it to another level. It wasn't like you just got someone from the corner, local corner store saying, "Hey, look, help me out. I need some help." You were like, "I'm going to a higher level, a professional institution. You might have to pay a little bit more money. You might have to do a little bit more research, but it got you the result that you wanted." So kudos to you for knowing how to do it and not like cutting corners to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think mentorship has truly changed my life. I can think about any period of my growth and development where I can signal and think about people who are part of that journey, right? And so I think especially for emerging professionals, like mentorship can be really, really valuable and definitely not something to overlook. But I also
Mhm.
want to mention that you also provide value as a mentee. So like in these
True.
mentor-menteeship relationships, it's really valuable because you have skills, you have talents that they may not have. And so I really see those connections and those relationships as a two-way street. It's
Yeah.
not just somebody pouring into you, it's also you being of service and pouring into someone else as well.
That is important. Lean into each other, right? And if you have a good mentee, that mentor grows even more because there's certain situations and things that they go through, and they help to analyze. They're like, you know what? Now I know how to do it the next time around, and then they help out the next
Absolutely.
person. It goes on. When you talk about yourself as an individual, right? I know that names, cultures mean so much. It kind of gives you like your center. When you think of your name and you think of the person you are, if you had to kind of put it together, like what is that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So my father named me Ajayi has a biblical meaning. It actually means messenger of God. And I truly believe that names sort of like dovetail our purpose and where we're gonna head in life. So I find it not surprising that I do speaking, especially because messenger of God is the meaning of my name. But I think part of having that name has made me realize that it's really important to me to be of service and also to address equity. So we'll talk more about the work that I specifically do in my field.
Yep.
But those are two things I think that have really stood out to me as it relates to my name. But Ajayi is so many things. I consider myself a multi-hyphenate from a child. I've been somebody who has um, been kind of labeled as like, okay, you over here and you over here and you over here. What are you doing? I'm doing everything. Okay, I'm interested in it all. Like,
Hey, I'm here for it.
if I could get my hands on it and it's making a difference, it's something that I'll be involved in. So yeah, I consider myself a multi-hyphenate, a creative, a proud Virgin Islander, and just somebody who is on a mission to empower people through my words, through my advocacy, through the work that I do in public health. That would be my description of myself I'd use.
Okay. Well said. Well said. And I'm glad that the name, obviously, I like how you dived in and you said that the name, it's funny how the name was given to you before you even found your purpose, right? Things don't happen on a coincidence. I mean, it happens because it was meant to be. I feel that way, right? So
Absolutely.
you know that you have found a true connection to your name, right? That's beautiful, right? Because some people search their whole life trying to find a
Yes.
connection, and the clue is within your name.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? It was like you go around, yeah, my name is, this, that, and the third, but then now you're like, wait, hold up, that actually makes sense. And it makes you work even harder now because now the name means even more to you. It's not just the name you put on a piece of paper. So kudos to the family for giving you that name.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm so grateful to my father for that. I love how you had described, as you asked the question, you were describing it as your center. I love that you described it as your center because, often when I'm making decisions or thinking about what direction I want to go, I always go back to that. I always go back to, okay, what is my name? What is my purpose? What am I trying to accomplish? And what am I here to do? Right. And so I think for so many of us, especially during a time where there are so many options or so many things you could do, it's
Yeah.
really great to have a center and a foundation.
And that center being your name, whew, that's lit. That's amazing. Now let's go back to your childhood, right? Your childhood seemed like it had a lot of great moments, right? A lot of the culture, the richness. Obviously, you had a tight knit family in a sense to kind of help bring you up. But like, let's talk about the child. Like, what are some of the things that help shape some experience that helped shape your journey to being the
Yeah.
person you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's so many I have. One of the things about being from a small place like St. Thomas or really just being from any Caribbean island is, I think as you age and as you grow, you start to notice disparities really early on. And when I say disparities, I'm referring to just access to different resources, people having different health or educational outcomes. And so as a child, I was in a middle class family. We did pretty well for ourselves, considering where we were. But it was also interesting just seeing the amount of disadvantage sort of around me and within my own community. And not only seeing it, but also just wondering why. Like, why does this exist, right? Like, why are some people in the situation and the predicament that they're in? And I feel like a lot of the rhetoric and the story around that was that, well, people are responsible for the life that they end up living, right? And while that might be partly true, as I went on to college and as I studied health and as I studied systems, I started realizing that there's a reason why we see a difference or a disparity in outcomes and differences for children, for families. And that just having that experience is really what has made me catapult into the career that I'm in public health. So yeah, that's one thing I would mention. I mean, another part of my childhood that I think comes to mind for me is that my mom was a service member. So she was in the National Guard and she was deployed for a year to Afghanistan. So,
Oh,
there was a year in my life where I remember like not knowing when I would see my mom again, not knowing when she would be home again. And, that was a really difficult experience. And I actually credit that experience to me eventually becoming a writer and an author because it was during that time that I started journaling.
yeah.
I
Oh,
had
okay,
so
okay.
many, I had so many
Many
thoughts
thoughts.
and so many emotions, right, surrounding that and not knowing how to process them. I just started writing them in a book. I had no clue it was called journaling at the time. And so I mentioned that because I think that while that was a difficult experience for me and my family, it also is something that has literally shaped the trajectory of my life.
Mhm. And through hardship, sometimes we see those things. It just, we don't even know what's happening at that present moment. It's hard to, I mean, obviously your mom is not around at that point. She's deployed. You're like, she was in the house every day with me. Now she's not. And then we kind of, not saying we take it for granted, but we're sitting there like, it's not the same, right?
Yes.
And during that hardship, you then pick up a book, you start journaling. And then that journal led to other things. And then that further and further. So it's hard sometimes to see it when it's happening. but it seemed that you did find a way to kind of slow down that process, because sometimes it's like it's happening so fast that you're like, and as a young adult too, right? You're just like, and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna go with the flow versus like slowing it down, saying, you know what, I want to voice my opinion. You know what, I'm gonna write it down. And
Yeah.
finding ways to kind of like channel that energy instead of putting it in a negative space. Because
Yeah,
that's
no,
a very, very hard thing.
you raised such a good point. I think that's why I'm so passionate. Anyone that follows me and follows my work, that's why I'm so passionate about personal growth and mental health and anything sort of related to that realm. Um, because, I always say that our careers are just a tool for the life that we want, right? They're
True.
not who we are. And so even if you do have a great career, even if you're trying to build a great career, you're still a whole person and a whole individual. And so I think I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's important to lift up.
Mm-hmm. Now, talk to me a little bit more about the educational background, right? Where
Yeah.
I see that the all these things are leaning towards something. And we're going to get to that career, right? We're going to talk about what you're doing currently, but talk to me about that educational journey and like what were some of the challenges you faced during that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I left St. Thomas a week or 2 weeks after my high school graduation, moved to DC, went to American University, and loved DC, hated the cold, came from a, very tropical island to the cold,
Oh,
record winters.
that's the deal breaker right there for some of us.
It
Like,
was
wait, hold on,
hard.
I gotta wear
Yeah.
boots. I
Listen,
gotta wear a scarf, a
I
hat.
had no real coat. Okay, I was in for it. But
Ah,
yeah. So I was actually a pre-med student at the time. So I had plans to go to medical school, and I wanted to practice medicine. And during my time in undergrad, I was actually in this leadership program. And in this leadership program, we had really focused on two things. We focused a lot on public speaking, but we also really focused on like systems, like how are systems created, right? The ones that exist within the US, the ones that exist in healthcare and education, in all these areas. And it was through that process, me being so curious and seeing the disparities I saw in St. Thomas, that I realized, like, I want to change the system. I don't want to just work within it. And so currently I'm actually completing a master's in public health at Johns Hopkins. And
okay, good school.
yes, my focus has been, really has been focused on what the root causes of health issues and health inequities are, and really trying to be a part of the voice around, people are not the only determining factor for their health outcomes, right? Systems are responsible for the health outcomes that we see in our communities, especially
Mm,
ones where I come
preach,
from.
preach.
And so, yeah, and so that has been sort of my like educational and career journey. And but like we're talking about and like we're mentioning, like all of that was birth and was the seed from my experiences in St. Thomas.
Mm. So, when it comes down to those experiences, right? Those experiences shape your. I mean, obviously, it was like about was it aligned in regards to the trajectory, right? These experiences that you had, like, what was like something that was like you could look back and be like, you know what, this was like a deal. This was a make a break for me. Like, there was a moment in time when you were like, I left St. Thomas, I'm getting education, but like it's not working out for me. Because there's always that
Mm,
moment where you start to. A lot of our guests have talked about it, where they say
yeah.
that imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here?
Yes.
You're like, I'm alone. There's not another person in this classroom that talks like me or has the accent of
Yes.
me or the food or the culture. You said DC, and obviously you talked about the cold, but we talked about a whole culture that you were brought up in, right? You're leaving that to start a whole new culture. And sometimes the American culture is not always the best.
Yeah, no, no,
You know what
no.
I'm
You're
saying?
you're you're hitting facts there. No, I appreciate that question because it's so true, and I definitely experienced some of that. I think for me, so I was, like I mentioned, I was a pre-med student at American University. And yeah, one of the things that was difficult for me was just fitting in general, like not seeing myself be represented in the classroom and my professors, really on campus. I was lucky because I had a few friends from back home that actually went to the same school that I did. And so we sort of banded together. Um, But I actually feel like my time struggling with fitting in had really shown me that I was not meant to, which was something I had known from really young.
Okay,
And
okay.
that like, I think sometimes like there's truth around the narrative of being a minority in a majority space can be challenging, but it's also an opportunity to stand out, right? It's also opportunity. I was sometimes the first person that people met from St. Thomas, which means that I get to show people what St. Thomas is
Yeah,
about, right?
that's true.
And so, yeah, so I think I just went through a perspective shift during that time, of fitting in and just realizing like, I just don't relate, on certain things to you all. Don't eat the foods that y'all eat, like the
Yeah.
things y'all talk about don't interest me. And so rather than trying to do that, I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna just be me. I'm gonna just be myself. And honestly, I feel like that has been kind of like a life lesson in general. Like in any space that I'm in, like you're gonna know where I'm from. It's just such a core part of me. And and so yeah, I think that would be one challenge that I definitely experienced. But yeah, I definitely had culture shock, like many students do, especially going to a PWI. So not only was I Black, but I was also Caribbean. So it was hard
Yeah,
to relate.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
hard to
yeah.
relate to some people, but I just saw that as an opportunity to stand out. And it worked in my advantage because I was a standout in the classroom, on campus, and people could say like, oh, that's that guy from the Virgin Islands, he's the first person I know from there.
Mm. I like how in both situations, the situation of your mother and now the situation of this coming to school, you still took that negative and made it a positive. I'm picking up what you're dropping down. I'm picking up what you're dropping down. I hope the
Yeah.
listeners are listening as well too. Situation with your mom, you said, let me channel that energy and put it into journaling and writing, right? And then over here, you're like, you know what? I found a reason to that being different was actually good, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we're taught that being different, especially with our culture, is a bad thing. A lot of our guests have talked about being like the angry Black woman in the office or something like that,
Mm.
right? And it's because she's passionate. It's not because she's angry. She's just passionate. But
Mhm.
because she's labeled like that, then she says, you know what, I'm not going to speak on that. Right. But
Mhm.
that uniqueness, that stuff that comes from our culture, it can't be found here in America because we brought it here. So you took that
Yes.
as an opportunity to say, this is me. If you don't like it, you
Yes.
don't like it. That's cool. But I like it,
Yeah.
right? Because some
Right.
people give it up. Some people
True.
talked about their accent in previous guests. They talked about their
Yeah.
accent. They say, you know what? I felt like I couldn't speak with my accent anymore. I felt like I was ashamed to
Mhm.
kind of, but you were like, you said clearly, you were like, I was the first representation of St. Thomas. So I was always putting my best foot forward. That's
Mhm.
a different mindset.
Mhm.
Despite how you felt, you still found a positive. So again,
Yeah.
I'm picking what you're dropping down.
No, I appreciate that. I think, that has, those gems have been truly why I have gotten to where I'm at. And I think why I'm able to live a life that feels whole and full
Hmm.
and you know what I mean? And I want to be honest, like I definitely struggle with the accent thing specifically. It was really annoying to have to constantly repeat myself when people didn't understand, like what I was saying. Um, but and they adjusted, and even being in the corporate environment, there are times where I speak in corporate professional lingo, and then there are other times where like my accent will come out. But I think like for me, my where I'm from is not just where I'm from, it's literally like a core foundation and pillar of who I am. And, so even when I was moved to America and when I was here in the United States, I made it my mission to try to stay connected as possible to my
Good.
culture, whether that's having friends around me that like have that walk of life, or connecting with people, who are Caribbean as well. I think those things definitely help. But no, I mean, like, I feel like life is just about lessons, and all these experiences I'm sharing today, you will find, for the listeners, you will find that there is some lesson behind of it, because that's been my life.
Hmm. Now, was there a moment in your career, in your journey, whether it be education or in your career, that kind of made you say, "This is what I want to do"? When your commitment to like advocating for health, right?
Mm.
especially for those communities that are disadvantaged.
Yeah, yeah. I think I had a couple of moments like that, but one that I'll share was I worked at a local health department in Florida. So I lived in Florida after DC, I moved to Florida. And, you know, working at the health department, it was kind of like my first, I want to say my first real career job. All the other ones before didn't really feel like real jobs. And, you know, being in that role, I just learned so much and saw face to face, like how much inequity existed in the community. And so, and not only that, but how important it was that people like me were part of the voice that's talking about the issues and sharing about the issues. And so, yeah, so that was like one experience for me that um, really sort of solidified how important it is that we have folks who are trying to change the system of health and trying to change the things that impact our health. And so yeah, I mean there have been so many others, from, you know, seeing news cycles of Black women lose their babies when they shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Or people not having access to clean and healthy parks, right? Or people being put at economic disadvantage or not able to get access to employment. There are just so many
Wow.
things I think that we continue to see that continue to like reaffirm my commitment to how important it is that we address equity in health. And I use the word equity because equality and equity in health do not look the same, right? Equality is everybody's getting the same thing, and equity is addressing the needs of particular individuals and particular communities. And so, you know, as I've been a part of this work, I've just seen and learned more about, you know, the inequities that exist, and how important it is that we join this mission to address and change that.
It's important that we do join. I like how you're saying that. Join, because you could sit there and keep complaining. We could literally sit there and complain, right? And I know, again, I like to bring up the previous guests. They said that their parents, and just like my parents as well too, at one point said, keep your head down and keep moving forward. Sit. There's no time to complain. Just keep working hard, right? But there's a point in time where we got to stand up for something. We are the new generation. Our kids and kids and kids are the future generation. We could change life for so many other people, but it starts with us. And I'm glad that like you found your passion and now you're really applying it. You saw it firsthand and you were like, you know, I need to do something about this. And not only are you doing it on a smaller scale, you're doing it on a larger scale. So kudos again, because
Appreciate that.
it does take a while to kind of commit and to something that you want, right? And it's a lot harder to commit to something that truly benefits so many other people. It's not like it's an internal thing. Like, hey, look, I'm gonna go up the
Yeah.
ladder, raise, I'm working, I'm gonna get up.
Right.
I'm just looking at the water. You're like, no, I'm
Right.
going to work every day to help these people, and you put the weight of that on your back.
Yeah.
In a sense,
Absolutely.
it's a lot of.
Yeah.
I'm saying a
I
lot
mean,
of
those
things.
people, you raise such a good point, because I mean, those people that we see, they could easily be our mothers, daughters, friends, family,
Yeah,
and sometimes they are, right?
yeah.
Like sometimes they are.
Walk right in, you be like, oh, auntie, what's up? Right?
Yeah, sometimes they are, but I just, you know, but it's just interesting because like I mentioned before, the narrative growing up, at least for me, and what I saw was that, you know, people were to blame for their outcomes and for the things they experienced. And just as you learn more about you know, the system of health and how things were created and designed in this country, you begin to see that that's further from the truth. It's one story, but it's not the total story, right? And so, yeah, no, I appreciate you like lifting that up. And there's so many people that do incredible work in this space. And it's great to be a part of that network of people who are really trying to, you know, really trying to change what health outcomes look like for our children and children's children.
Mm-hmm. Now, with your background biology, you know, we're talking about public health. Like, how did you this knowledge? Like, how did you bring this knowledge into the passion? Like, how did you get into that and speaking and advocating?
Yeah. One thing I will say is that, you know, that has been a value of mine and something that has been important to me as I become more educated is to continue to make information accessible to folks who aren't in spaces that I'm in. You know, as we go further into academia and degrees and stuff like that, like these fields have their own jargon and it becomes very limiting and inaccessible. And so, you know, as I continue to learn more about equity and learn more about health and health outcomes and why we see the disparities that exist, you know, I've just been on a mission to just make that as plain and as clear as possible to people everywhere, you know, and I think having that educational background combined with my, you know, just background in writing, I've tried to find opportunities to kind of merge those two things and really highlight some of those issues, but in ways that like are really easy for people to understand. So that's just been, I think, one part of it. In terms of speaking, it's really funny because as a child, I was really shy. Really shy in terms of I was not always the type of person that would strike up a conversation with a stranger or that would talk to someone. But what I was doing, what I realized about myself is that like as a child, I was observing and learning a lot
Yes.
and
Yes, you
taking
were.
in
Yes, you were.
information. And you know, and so it's interesting because people who have known me for so long have seen me grown. They're like, you were so shy as a child. Like, how do you do speaking now? How is that? How is that a thing? And I will honestly say, like, you know, I mentioned being in that leadership program in undergrad. I'll honestly say that, you know, um, when you put your mind to wanting to develop a skill, it is absolutely possible, right, for you to work
Yeah.
on that and craft that. And speaking wasn't, I'll be honest, speaking was not something that I was great at in the beginning. But it was something that I was steadfast about wanting to work on and to grow in. And I know that, again, going back to the meaning of my name, I know that like being a messenger, being a speaker is literally part of me and who I am. And so, yeah, I've just been using these messages and these life experiences and my educational background, and the stories I
All
learned
of it.
from others. Yeah,
Yeah,
just to
all of
share
it.
these messages.
It's you're like well, how to describe it? You're reminding me of like a Mario and Luigi, right? The video game where you're just collecting coins on this journey. You're like Zelda. You're just
Yes.
like, let me snatch this up. I don't know when I'm gonna
Mhm.
use it. Let me just keep snatching it. And
Yes.
and you keep going. And you said it earlier too. You were like, I was here, I was here, I was there. I had my hands in everything, right? And as you speak, I'm just listening and I'm like, this man's like a Zelda right here. this it's like on a quest. And everything you picked up, obviously it worked in your favor, as you could see, right? So
Mhm.
you knew what to pick up, you knew what to drop as well. Dead weight, you were like, let me push that to the side, but these things I'm gonna keep. I might not be able to use them right now, but as I get older and I get
Yes.
to that lane and that passion, and as I get more
Mhm.
connected to it, it'll definitely be applied. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
you was
appreciate
out there.
you. No, I appreciate you mentioning that. You know, I think for me, it's so important for us to make decisions based on our values. And it's actually something I talk about in my book, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about. But not just in your life, but also in your career, like really to be aligning your time, your experiences, your network with your values. And
Yeah.
it takes time, right, to like learn what those values are. But I think values can be a really great compass for like where you should put your attention, where you should focus. And service and community and some of the things we mentioned have always been a value of mine. And so anything that will help me do that better to me is a win.
Mhm. Well, keynote speaker, author of a book. Let's get into that. What is the title of the book? And
Yes,
where can we find this book?
I
And
would love to share
what's the
that.
focus? What's the focus of the book?
Sure, sure. So the book is titled Displaced to Realign, the proven skills pitch strategy to land the right role with intention. This book was written based on experience I had last year being laid off from a company. And
Mm,
we had a huge company layoff. It was super unexpected. And you know, it was through my layoff that I found myself, you know, obviously seeking employment during a really competitive time on the job market, still very competitive. And I was noticing that a lot of folks who had so many years of experience were just not breaking through the job market for some reason. And so I was like, well, obviously what everyone is doing isn't working, so I need to try something different. And
mm,
so in the book, this book will provide individuals kind of with a go-to strategy on how to sell your skills on the job market and how to build relationships on the job market. And so those were the two things that I felt like were the core tenets of me landing another role at an organization.
Mm.
I was laid off for 4 months, and using that strategy that I developed in this book, I was able to, to go back from layoff to landing, as I mentioned, using this strategy. And so this book is available on my website, the Finding Your Voice blog website. If you type in Finding Your Voice blog, it'll come straight up on Google. It's available there, and it'll be available on Amazon, on Kindle, and on Kobo Books in a few weeks.
And when you look at your book, right, when you think of who's the group of individuals that you're trying to empower or focus on? You mentioned something about that.
Thank you. I like that question. Yeah, so really this book is for folks who are trying to make a career transition. It's especially for minority emerging professionals that come like from backgrounds like I do. I think a lot of the information and tools in the book are provided to individuals that don't have access to this information about how to navigate the job market.
True.
And so
which is a very hard thing. Complex at times. They don't make it easy.
They don't make it easy. They don't make it easy. And in this book, I'm really proud of this book and this product because, I feel like a lot of career development and career advice books are often disempowering, right? But this book in particular is really showing people that like you are worthy and deserving of the career and the job that you want. Here's how to do that. Here's how to get to that. And it really starts with knowing what your values are. So in the very beginning of the book, I talk about aligning your values with what you want to do professionally, all the way up to the interview.
Sounds like a really good book, strong book right there. And there's a lot of strategies in there. I know that there's going to be a lot of gems. Some of the gems you actually dropped today.
Yes.
But there'll be more gems in the book. So listeners, if you're listening again, go pick up that book, go support, right? Go pick up the book. If you want that knowledge, you want to get some more information, definitely go pick it up. And like you said, it'll be on Amazon soon. So tap in when you get the opportunity to, right?
Yes.
In your opinion, what are some of the biggest challenges, like us as immigrants and minorities are facing? And what are some of the things that could overcome when it comes to like the job market today?
So I think we touched on this a little bit already, just from my experiences. I think, some of the challenges that immigrants can face in the professional landscape is around fitting in, like assimilating, wanting to feel like they need to assimilate to corporate American culture in some ways. But I find that like, for the folks who are listening, your background, the lens through which you see the world, the experiences you have had, provide value to any space that you're in, to the organization that you're in.
True.
And so it's important to like, try your best to kind of keep that in mind and hold on to that as you navigate, your career. I think that's one thing that comes to mind for me. I also think knowing, for some folks, just knowing that they're worthy and deserving of whatever career that they want. Just because you don't see folks that might look like you doing the things that you desire to do doesn't mean that it's not possible. And
True.
so I think that, I think that's another just important kind of component, just having a really strong belief system, a really strong mindset and foundation to kind of land on. And the third thing I will mention, I think, is still just equity in the job market. Like I have to mention that as somebody who's talked about equity today, I think there's been progress that has been made, but there's still so much more to do, especially as it relates to having representation on boards, having representation in leadership roles, in decision-making capacities, absolutely. And sometimes too, for the folks who are in that space, they often find that they might be the only immigrant or Black person or person of color in that position, which can be really, really hard to navigate. And my advice for that would just be to, again, tap into your network. I think for me, networking is always a critical part of my career development strategy. There's never a moment where I feel like, okay, getting to this next level doesn't require me to continue to build relationships with people. And I would say, when building those relationships, don't only think about the folks above you. Build relationships laterally, because those are the individuals who are going to grow with you and come up with you.
Come tap in. Come on. Come
and
on.
so, I want to mention that too, because, oftentimes when we go to conferences as professionals, the first person we want to talk to is the person that did the speech or did the keynote. But when we often neglect the people sitting right around us in the room. And so that can be really, really useful for folks who might be struggling with feeling alone or disconnected in their career.
Now you're right. You are so right. You are so right, because you never know. You never know who's sitting next to you. I went to a seminar with great speaker Tony Robbins. Right. I went to one of his seminars in Florida, and one of the major lines, it was like a 4-day seminar, and one of the biggest things that he said in there to me, that he said a lot of great things, but one thing that has always stuck with me: proximity is key. Said once he said that, I closed my book and I said, all right, this I guess this is it. I'm in a room full of 4,000 people. I'm paying attention to you, Tony, and I'm trying to find a way to connect with you, Tony, and hear all the stuff. But then I said, Paul, you got 4,000 people around you. Like, what are we talking about here? Let's start networking. Do what you do best, right? So I'm glad you say that, moving lateral and moving up the ladder together. Now, when it comes down to, a project that you're working on, right? Any particular project that you have worked on that, within that health profession that deals to impact that community, that has a disadvantage?
Yeah, I love this question because I think it connects to some of what I mentioned already. So there was a project I had worked on previously with two other colleagues in my industry. We had developed this card game that would teach people about how equity actually works. Like, what is equity and how does it relate to health?
Like a Uno or something.
Exactly. So it was a family card game that we developed. It was very respected across our industry. We actually won an industry best practice award for developing this game. And I went to Michigan and I went to Boston and a couple other cities talking about this game and talking about this product. And I'm really proud of it because the idea with this card game was that like a family of 4 could sit down and play this card game. And by the end of this card game, they would understand what equity is and how it relates to health. And so I really am proud of this product too, because, it was something that hadn't really been done in my field or in my industry in particular before. And I think it just goes back to what we talked about, embracing your uniqueness, embracing thinking differently, embracing thinking outside of the box. Because the individuals I worked on this product with, we could have created another training or PowerPoint on here's equity, which it would have been great. But it was also awesome to be able to craft something that was just different and outside of the box. And so I can share some links to that. That's not quite shared publicly yet, but that's something I'm definitely proud of.
Finding a way to make things fun, learning.
Yeah,
some of my
fun
best professors,
and accessible,
that's
easy
right,
to understand.
You got to meet them where they're at.
Right.
You can't just throw a textbook at them and say, figure it out. Not everybody is gonna. That's why when it comes to the American culture, I feel like it's made a certain type of way that only a certain amount of individuals could truly understand it and go through it, right? When you add all the other different cultures and ethnicities and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff, not everybody reads that book the same exact way. So it makes it so much harder. And like you said, that's when the systems are created, and some systems are there to help bring people up, and some systems are made to kind of bring people down. But if you're not smart enough, you won't notice that. And that's where individuals like you come along. You're like, hey, look, let me school you to the game real quick. But I'm gonna do it in a fun way.
Right.
You walk away with the experience of it being fun, and that if it is fun, we would want to learn. When it becomes complex and hard, we don't want to do it.
Yes.
Our life is already complex. You're trying to stay afloat in America, if that was the case, right? But if you have cards that kind of give you some insight, you're like, you know what? Maybe $1, save $1 today. Okay, I'll save $1 today. And you save another $1 before you know you got $5, right? And that was just because you were having fun while doing it. Versus other individuals, they give you a massive booklet on how to save. When you go to
Yes.
the bank and you're like, oh, I'm just going to keep my money under the bed.
Yes. No, you raised
It's,
such good points. Yeah, and I want to say for any individuals who are growing in their career in academia or just acquiring more knowledge, like always be thinking about how you can continue to make information accessible to the people that are not in the spaces that you are in. Because what's the point of obtaining all these degrees and this information if you are not going to be a conduit to share that information with a larger community? And so, I feel like oftentimes, we enter into these spaces and we learn all this knowledge and this information, and we just get lost in the jargon and the fluff of academia. And I truly think that, we all have a responsibility, whatever your discipline is, to share that information accessibly. So that would just be something I would want to lift up today as well.
So, and I know you're talking about today, but like, what about the future? Like, talk to me about what do you have planned for yourself ahead? I mean, obviously,
Yes.
in public health, your career, and your work as an author. Is there any plans of empowering, inspiring, future generations? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of plans and goals, and it was funny. I was talking to my therapist recently just about how, just the more you grow, the more your goals sort of expand and the more they align with where you're heading. Yeah, I mean, I want to continue to share messages around personal growth. My goal is to have a New York Times bestselling book. I'm just gonna proudly share, and so yeah, and so that's where I'm heading. I'm heading on really, like, I saw this book sort of as like, my first introduction to like, hey folks, like this is a space that I'm entering and that I'm conquering, and so yeah, that's one thing that I want to do. And outside of I think my authorship and the speaking that I've done, I just want to continue to, like I said, just use my education, expertise, and lived experience to serve people, to make health better for people who look like me, for people who look like people I know, and really continue to address the root causes of all the health issues that we're seeing. But yeah, people will definitely be seeing more from me as it relates to speaking, any speaking gigs I have coming up. I have other books and products that I'm planning on developing in the career advice space and personal growth space. So yeah, I'm just getting started, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, you really elevating. This whole conversation has been by elevating. There was some hiccups along the way, but I see that the elevation is there for you. You definitely taking
Yes.
flight, and not only are you taking flight with you and your passion and obviously the mission and your name having so much to, but you're also taking people with you.
Yes.
It's important. And I say it a lot of times when I speak to the artists. I always tell the artists, like, you're not an artist unless you give back, right? That's a part of the plan. There's a part of the plan. It's not just make it and be happy. It's make it, but also find a way to bring other people into that space. Because then if there's more individuals, because we complained at one point, we didn't say we had enough of us in the room. We said we feel this is awkward, doesn't feel right. Now you're at a place of leadership, right? Bring more people up that look like us and speak like us. So then at that place, we're all in the same space together, working collectively, contributing to everyone else's success. So
Agreed.
amazing work. I mean, this hearing your story, obviously looking at your bio but actually hearing it, right? And the work that you do is definitely empowering. It's definitely very inspiring. Good luck with the book, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Looking forward to seeing that New York Times things. I'm gonna see a couple stars next to your name.
Yes.
Yes. Any last words for the listeners right now?
Any last words? I think my last words for folks, which has been, I think, the theme of this conversation, is just to know that, like, everything is teaching you something, right? At each moment, each experience, people you encounter is teaching you something. And if you just pay attention and just ask yourself, okay, what is this teaching me? What am I learning from this? You'll find that you're able to use that, right, for the next season, for the next thing. And
True.
it's a cycle that kind of just repeats itself, right? Because life never stops teaching us. And so I think if you have that mindset, if you have a growth mindset and a lifelong learner mindset, that all the things that we mentioned today you'll find that they'll naturally align for you. So I'm wishing everyone the best that listens to this.
Ajayi, thank you so much for your time, your patience, your knowledge, the gems that you have dropped, and also for just sharing your culture with us, because you're the first from St. Thomas.
Yes, big up.
You don't know, some big up self, But I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Ajayi, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcasts.